My name is Ren Vale, and until 3 months ago, the most impressive title attached to my name was Guy Who Carries Other People's Bags. I worked as a porter for dungeon raiding teams because my mana core was so weak that the Academy crystal actually flickered, apologized, and shut itself off when I touched it. The examiner stamped me as F rank and told me to choose a safe career. So naturally, I chose the career where I followed armed psychopaths into holes filled with dragons. It paid better than washing dishes. The day everything changed, I was carrying 6 backpacks, 3 emergency potion crates, 1 unconscious scout, and a panicking priest who refused to touch the cave floor because he claimed the moss looked judgmental. Our party had just reached the boss room when a golden announcement appeared across every hunter badge in the dungeon. Garrick Thorne has awakened an S-rank physique. The whole party froze. Garrick was our frontline warrior, a gigantic man with shoulders wide enough to block hallways. He had been A-rank that morning. Then the boss, a black iron ogre, smashed him through a wall, and instead of dying like a reasonable person, Garrick stood up glowing gold. Everyone started screaming his name. I was about to cheer too when a transparent blue screen opened directly in front of my face. Rival Hunter System initialized. Nearby individual has achieved a major milestone. Challenge generated. Surpass Garrick Thorne's physical power within 10 minutes. Failure penalty, none. Reward. Physical ability permanently adjusted to exceed target's current peak by 1%. I stared at it. Then I stared at Garrick, who had just caught the ogre's club with one hand. Then I looked back at the system. 1%? I whispered. The system added a second line. Minimum superiority guaranteed. That sounded like the kind of sentence that ruined lives. The challenge objective appeared under it. Lift an object heavier than Garrick Thorne's maximum recorded lift. I had no idea what his maximum lift was. Then the ogre swung again. Garrick ducked, and the club crushed the stone floor. The ceiling cracked. A giant slab of dungeon rock, easily the size of a house, tore loose and dropped between us and the exit. The system put a little arrow over it. Recommended object. I almost laughed. Then the ogre roared. Garrick charged, and everyone forgot about the useless porter behind them. I dropped the bags, walked to the fallen slab, placed both hands under the edge, and pulled. Nothing happened. I pulled harder. My back screamed. My arms shook. I saw stars. Somewhere behind me, Garrick punched the ogre so hard its helmet dented inward. The timer showed 8 minutes. I looked at the slab and remembered something important. The system never said I had to lift it with muscle. I still had 12 mana crystals in my supply crate. I shoved 3 under the slab, cracked them with a healing hammer, and dumped raw mana into the dungeon's old levitation runes. The runes exploded. The slab jumped upward like it had remembered an appointment. Unfortunately, I was still holding it. For about half a second, I technically lifted the entire thing above my head. Challenge complete. Reward applied. Every bone in my body popped at once. My arms thickened. My vision sharpened. I felt power flood through me like someone had replaced my blood with thunder. Garrick turned around just in time to see me holding a house-sized rock while screaming in terror. He stopped fighting. The ogre stopped fighting. The priest stopped panicking and started praying to me instead. Then the levitation rune died. The slab dropped. I threw it. I did not mean to throw it at the boss. I also did not know I could throw something that big. The slab hit the black iron ogre, carried it through 2 dungeon walls, and opened a new exit to the outside. The raid report called it an unconventional finishing move. Garrick called it suspicious. I called it the worst promotion of my life, because 5 minutes after we left the dungeon, the capital's fastest assassin broke the national speed record during a public demonstration. The system immediately chimed. Challenge generated. Surpass Lyra Voss, known as the Crimson Blink. Reward. Movement speed permanently adjusted to exceed target's current peak by 1%. I had not even finished my soup. The objective was worse. Reach the bell tower on the opposite side of the city before Lyra's demonstration lap ends. I looked out the tavern window. The bell tower was 4 districts away. Lyra was already moving. She became a red streak racing across rooftops while a crowd counted down her record time. I threw money on the table and ran. At first, I was still just strong. Very strong. Ridiculously strong, but not fast. So I did what any sensible man with newly acquired S-rank strength would do. I kicked the ground. The street exploded. I launched myself over 3 buildings, crashed through a laundry line, bounced off a bakery roof, apologized to a woman whose chimney I stole by accident, and discovered that momentum was a personal enemy. I could not turn. I flew straight toward the royal statue in the city square. There were 2 options. Hit the statue face first or improvise. I threw the chimney. The recoil changed my direction. I missed the statue, hit a decorative fountain, skipped across the water 3 times, and launched again. People below started pointing at me. One kid yelled, "Mom, the porter is flying badly." He was correct. I finally saw the bell tower. Lyra was 1 rooftop away from finishing her lap. I had no roof left to kick, so I kicked the air. Nothing happened. Then I remembered how hard I could kick. The pressure blast behind my foot detonated like a cannon. I shot forward, smashed through the bell tower window, wrapped myself around the bell rope, and rang the giant bronze bell with my entire body. The sound shook pigeons out of the sky. Challenge complete. Reward applied. Suddenly, the whole city slowed down. Dust stopped drifting. Pigeons looked like statues. A woman below was in the middle of dropping an apple, and I could count the little specks of dirt on it while it fell. Then Lyra arrived at the tower. She stared at me. I stared at her. She glanced at the destroyed window. I said, I took a shortcut. She looked across the city at the line of broken rooftops. That was not a shortcut, she said. That was a natural disaster. By sunset, rumors were already spreading about the mysterious F-rank porter who had somehow outmuscled an S-rank and outrun the Crimson Blink on the same day. I wanted to go home, lock the door, and figure out what the rival hunter system actually was. Instead, the Royal Academy held its annual magic exhibition that evening, and Archmage Selene Auric achieved perfect 7-circle mana control in front of 12,000 spectators. The system chimed before the applause ended. I covered my face with both hands. No. Challenge generated. No. Surpass Selene Auric's mana control. I barely have mana. Reward. Mana control permanently adjusted to exceed target's current peak by 1%. Objective. Cast a spell using less mana waste than the target. I tried to close the screen. It moved with my hand. I tried turning around. It followed me. I put a blanket over my head. The screen appeared inside the blanket. Apparently, Destiny respected no privacy. The problem was simple. I had amazing strength, ridiculous speed, and a mana core with the magical capacity of a tired potato. Selene had just cast a 7-circle spell while wasting less than 1 drop of mana out of an ocean. I could not beat her by casting bigger magic, so I needed to cast smaller magic. Much smaller. I ran back to the academy, bought a beginner spell scroll from a street vendor, and learned Spark. Spark was normally used by children to light candles. Most apprentices wasted about half the spell's mana because the formula was too tiny to bother optimizing. I had 42 seconds left on the system timer. I sat in an alley behind the academy and tried casting it. A blue spark popped over my finger. Mana waste. 37%. Terrible. Again. 22%. Again. 9%. Again. 3%. My mana core was nearly empty. I had 1 cast left. I closed my eyes and thought about Selene's demonstration. I had watched the way she shaped mana through 7 layers, controlling every thread before releasing it. I did not need 7 layers. I needed 1 perfect thread. So I stopped trying to make a spark. I moved the smallest possible amount of mana from my core to my fingertip and let it become heat naturally. A tiny orange dot appeared. It was pathetic. It could not light a candle. It could barely annoy a snowflake. Mana waste 0.0001%. Challenge complete. Reward applied. My senses expanded. Mana was suddenly everywhere. In the bricks, in the rain gutters, in the weeds pushing through stone, in the old barrier lines under the academy, in the breath of every mage walking past me. I could feel each current like strings stretched across the world. Then my finger spark touched the academy barrier. Because I now had better mana control than the greatest archmage alive, I accidentally synchronized with the entire magical defense network. Every lamp in the academy turned on. Every training golem saluted. Every locked door opened. The headmaster's enchanted wig flew off and tried to defend the campus by itself. I panicked and pulled my mana back. That was apparently the wrong move. The entire academy barrier folded inward and formed a glowing arrow pointing directly at me. 12,000 spectators turned around. Selene Auric looked down from the exhibition platform. Our eyes met across the courtyard. She whispered something. I could read her lips from that distance now because my speed-enhanced perception was unfair. She said, "Who is that?" I went home through the sewer. The next morning, I discovered a serious flaw in my system. It did not care whether I knew the person achieving the milestone. It only cared whether they were nearby. And I lived in the capital. The capital was where every famous lunatic on the continent came to break records. At breakfast, the #1 blacksmith forged a sword with a legendary edge. Quest. At lunch, the Saint of Healing regrew a duke's missing arm. Quest. At dinner, the Beast Queen tamed a wyvern no one had ever ridden. Quest. At midnight, a drunken chef received the title Divine Cook after making noodles so good a spirit possessed the restaurant just to ask for seconds. Quest. By sunrise, I had not slept. My apartment was on fire. I owned a wyvern. I could heal paper cuts by glaring at them. And I had somehow invented a kitchen knife that could cut the concept of spiciness out of soup. I named the wyvern Bucket. He hated the name. The blacksmith quest had required me to create a sharper object than Master Doran's legendary sword. I did not know blacksmithing, so I took a cheap iron spoon, used my perfect mana control to align the metal grain 1 molecule at a time, and accidentally made its edge sharp enough to slice a steel anvil in half. The system rewarded me with crafting precision greater than Doran's. The healing quest required restoring a worse injury than the saint had healed. I had no patience. Then Bucket bit me in half. Not metaphorically. He was angry about the name. The system accepted me as my own patient. I used the saint's basic regeneration prayer from a public pamphlet, controlled the mana perfectly, and reattached myself before my upper body finished yelling at my lower body. Reward applied. Bucket stopped biting me after that, mostly because I stopped reacting. The beast taming quest required me to tame something more dangerous than the Beast Queen's wyvern, so I walked into the Royal Monster Preserve and looked for the strongest creature I could find. There was an ancient thunder drake sleeping behind 7 barriers. I was about to challenge it when a tiny gray bird landed on my shoulder. The caretaker screamed. I froze. What? I asked. He pointed at the bird. That is the Calamity Finch, the bird chirped. Apparently, it had destroyed 3 kingdoms 200 years ago by copying catastrophe-class magic, and had been sealed in the preserve because nobody could kill it. It looked like a dirty potato with wings. The system marked it as valid. Objective: establish a superior bond. I had no idea how. The Beast Queen used dominance, contracts, blood oaths, and years of training. I had half a sandwich. I gave the bird the sandwich. It climbed into my coat. Challenge complete. Reward applied. The caretaker fainted. I named the bird Pickle. Bucket became even angrier. The cooking quest was the strangest. To surpass the newly crowned divine cook, I had to make a meal that caused a stronger emotional reaction than his noodles. I was too exhausted to cook properly, so I made porridge. Then Pickle sneezed into it. The sneeze copied a tiny amount of my perfect mana control. The porridge awakened as a low-level spirit, and when I served it to the system's evaluation altar, the bowl looked up at me and said, "Father." I screamed for 11 straight seconds. The system classified my emotional reaction as overwhelming. Challenge complete. Reward applied. That was how I became a better cook than the divine cook without making edible food. I started to understand the true danger of rival hunter. It did not want me to become powerful in a normal way. It wanted me to become slightly better than whoever had just become the best. 1% stronger, 1% faster, 1% more precise, 1% better at healing, forging, taming, cooking, surviving, sensing, throwing, and apparently panicking creatively. Individually, 1% sounded small. Stacked together, it was turning me into something deeply unreasonable, and the famous people of the capital were beginning to notice. 3 days later, Garrick Thorne invited me to a private meeting. The Crimson Blink was there. Archmage Selene was there. Master Doran the Blacksmith was there. The Saint of Healing was there. The Beast Queen was there. Even the Divine Cook was there, holding a bowl of noodles like a weapon. They sat around a giant circular table in complete silence. I sat at the empty chair. Pickle sat on my head. Bucket's face was pressed against the window because he was too large to enter. Garrick folded his arms. "Ren Vale," he said. "We have a question." I nodded. Selene leaned forward. "Why does reality insult us every time we improve?" I considered lying. Then the system chimed. "Nearby individual has achieved a major milestone." Everyone at the table went pale. I looked around. No one moved. The saint whispered, "Who did it?" A servant slowly entered the room carrying tea. He looked terrified. "Congratulations," he said to Garrick. "The military just updated the rankings. You are officially the continent's #1 defensive warrior." Garrick closed his eyes. I closed mine too. Challenge generated. Surpass Garrick Thorne's defense. Garrick stood up. "No," the system continued. Objective: survive an attack stronger than any attack Garrick Thorne has survived. Everyone stared at me. I stared back. Then Pickle sneezed. The room exploded. For the record, Pickle's sneeze was not normal. The Calamity Finch could copy magic it had witnessed. Since it had spent 3 days riding on my head, it had witnessed nearly everything I could do. That meant the tiny bird had somehow copied Selene's 7-circle compression, my improved mana control, Garrick's aura reinforcement, and one extremely illegal explosion spell it had seen through an academy window, all at once. The meeting hall vanished in white light. When I opened my eyes, I was standing at the bottom of a crater. My clothes were gone except for one boot. The circular table was now a ring of burning sawdust. Selene was embedded upside down in a wall. Lyra had escaped the explosion but somehow lost both eyebrows. Garrick was kneeling behind his shield, which had melted into the shape of a disappointed pancake. The divine cook was still holding his noodle bowl. Not one drop had spilled. I respected that more than I wanted to admit. Then the system chimed. Challenge progress. Attack insufficient. I looked at the smoking crater. "What do you mean insufficient?" Garrick slowly raised his head. He looked insulted too. The strongest attack he had ever survived, according to the system, was not Pickle's sneeze. It was apparently a direct breath attack from the ash dragon 12 years earlier. The Beast Queen climbed out from under the broken floor. "So," she said, staring at me, "you need to be hit by something worse than dragonfire." I nodded. Everyone went quiet. Then Selene pulled herself out of the wall. "I have an idea." Every instinct in my body told me to run. Unfortunately, Lyra was faster than my instincts. She grabbed my collar before I moved. An hour later, they dragged me to the Academy's forbidden testing grounds, where the kingdom stored magical weapons too dangerous for war. Celine pointed toward a black metal pillar covered in warning seals. This is the Heaven Piercer. I stared at it. What does it do? It fires condensed mana equivalent to 12 archmages casting at once. Has anyone survived it? No. That seems like an important detail. Garrick put a hand on my shoulder. You wanted to surpass my defense. I did not want this quest. Neither did I. The system timer showed 4 minutes. I could not dodge because the challenge said survive the attack. I could not block it with someone else. I could use tools, though. That gave me an idea. I forged a spoon. Everyone watched me use Master Doran's portable furnace to create the ugliest metal spoon ever made. Celine looked offended. You are facing the strongest magical cannon in the kingdom. I know. And you made cutlery. It is very good cutlery. Using my crafting precision, I aligned the spoon to channel mana perfectly. Using my mana control, I connected it to the Academy barrier. Using my physical strength, I drove the handle into the ground and tilted the bowl toward the cannon. Then I used the cooking skill I had accidentally gained to coat it with a layer of spirit porridge. I had no idea whether that last part would help, but the porridge had called me father, and I was not emotionally prepared to abandon my child. Celine activated the Heaven Piercer. The sky turned blue-white. The blast hit the spoon. For one glorious instant, my plan worked. The spoon redirected the beam upward. Then the spoon melted. The beam came back down. It hit me directly. I experienced several things at once. First, pain. Second, more pain. Third, the surprising realization that skeletons apparently have their own opinions about being vaporized. Then my healing ability activated automatically. My body regenerated almost as fast as the beam destroyed it. I became trapped in the least enjoyable argument in history between catastrophic magic and superior healing. The blast ended. I was still standing. Technically, my left leg was backward, my hair was smoking, and my one remaining boot had somehow survived everything. The system chimed. Challenge complete. Reward applied. My body hardened. My skin did not become stone or metal. It simply gained the same impossible defensive efficiency I had gained in every other category. 1% beyond Garrick's peak. I straightened my backward leg with a click. Garrick stared at me. Then he walked to the Heaven Piercer, read the damage gauge, and quietly removed his #1 defensive warrior medal. He placed it on the ground. I am retiring. That was the beginning of the panic. At first, only the people who had personally witnessed my quests understood what was happening. Then a week later, the Sword Saint arrived in the capital. His name was Kale Draven. He was 73 years old, wore plain white robes, and carried a wooden sword because he claimed steel had become unnecessary 30 years ago. He had spent his entire life chasing the peak of swordsmanship. He challenged the Royal Sword Monument, performed one slash, and split a mountain 40 kilometers away without damaging a single flower between himself and the target. The monument declared him the first transcendent sword saint in 800 years. The crowd erupted. Kale smiled. I was buying vegetables 2 streets away. The system chimed. I dropped a cabbage. Challenge generated. Surpass Kale Draven's swordsmanship. I whispered. I do not know how to use a sword. Reward. Sword mastery permanently adjusted to exceed target's current peak by 1%. Objective. Perform a cleaner cut than Kale Draven. I looked at the cabbage rolling away. Then at the kitchen knife on the vegetable seller's table. Then at the distant mountain with the perfect line through its center. There was no clever loophole this time. Kale's slash was not about power. It was perfect technique. So I went to see him. He was surrounded by nobles, knights, and students begging him for lessons. I squeezed through the crowd holding a cabbage in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. Kale looked at me. Can I help you, young man? I need to cut something cleaner than you did. The entire crowd laughed. Kale did not. His eyes sharpened. Why? It is complicated. Are you a swordsman? No. What style do you practice? Vegetable. Someone behind me choked. Kale stared at the kitchen knife. Then he smiled. Show me. The system timer had 14 minutes left. I could not learn 70 years of swordsmanship in 14 minutes. But I already had physical strength beyond Garrick, speed beyond Lyra, mana control beyond Celine, and crafting precision beyond Doran. Kale had made a perfect cut by combining body, timing, and intent. I did not need his method. I needed his result. I placed the cabbage on a stone pedestal. Then I sharpened the kitchen knife with my fingers until its edge was nearly molecular. I flooded my arm with perfectly controlled mana. I adjusted my grip using the same microscopic precision I used while forging. Finally, I moved at a speed so high the spectators could not see my hand. I cut. Nothing happened. The cabbage remained whole. The crowd laughed again. Then a breeze passed. The cabbage separated into 2 halves. The stone pedestal separated too. The platform separated. The street beneath us separated. A line appeared across the royal palace in the distance. I stopped breathing. Kale turned slowly toward the palace. The top half slid 1 finger width to the left. Every guard in the capital screamed. I had forgotten to control the depth. The system flashed. Cut cleanliness, 99.9999%. Target record, 99.99998%. Challenge complete. Reward applied. And suddenly I understood swords. Not one style. All of them. Every stance I had ever seen made sense. Every weapon's center of balance became obvious. I could see invisible lines through objects where a blade would travel with the least resistance. Kale was still looking at the palace. I expected anger. Instead, the old man started laughing. He laughed so hard he had to sit down. I spent 70 years becoming a sword saint, he said. You walked here with groceries. I am sorry. No. This is hilarious. Then he drew his wooden sword. The system chimed again. I nearly cried. Kale had achieved another milestone. He had become the first sword saint in history to experience complete freedom from pride. The rival hunter system considered that a spiritual achievement. Challenge generated. Surpass Kale Draven's freedom from pride. I stared at the screen. How am I supposed to do that? The objective appeared. Publicly embarrass yourself without emotional damage. I looked around at the thousands of people staring at me. The sliced palace, the cabbage, my kitchen knife, and the 73-year-old master laughing on the ground. I realized I had a chance. I raised both arms and shouted, I have no idea what I am doing. Nothing. The system wanted more, so I put the two cabbage halves on my head like a helmet and danced. Still nothing. Kale began laughing harder. I needed true embarrassment. Then Bucket swooped down from the sky, saw the cabbage on my head, assumed it was food, and swallowed my entire upper body. My legs kept dancing out of pure panic. The crowd went silent. Then someone started clapping. Soon the entire plaza was cheering while my legs kicked from Bucket's mouth. I felt absolutely no shame because I was too busy trying not to be digested. Challenge complete. Reward applied. Bucket spat me out. Kale immediately bowed to me. That made things worse. By nightfall, half the continent believed I was some hidden grandmaster pretending to be an idiot. The other half believed I was an idiot who had accidentally become a grandmaster. The second half was closer. Then the ranking organizations noticed the pattern. Whenever someone announced an extraordinary achievement near me, something impossible happened shortly afterward. A record fell. A title became second place. A legend became slightly less legendary. People started calling it the Ren effect. I hated the name. The Adventurer Guild reacted first. They stopped publicly announcing S-rank promotions in the capital. Then the Mage Association stopped publishing spell records. Then the Warrior Hall covered its strength leaderboard with a curtain. The Assassins Union went further and removed all names from its rankings, replacing them with vague descriptions like, probably fast, and faster than average, but please do not investigate. For one peaceful week, I received no quests. I slept 12 hours a day. I ate normal food. I fixed my apartment. I convinced the living porridge to stop calling me father in public. Then humanity discovered that hiding achievements was much harder than achieving them. A young mage named Tessa accidentally became the youngest archmage in history while trying to boil bathwater. Her family immediately boarded up their windows. The Mage Association sent agents to confiscate every recording crystal within 5 kilometers. They almost succeeded. Then Tessa's grandmother posted about it on a neighborhood message board. The system chimed from across the city. 3 guild officials reportedly fainted at the same time. My challenge was to become younger than Tessa while retaining archmage level ability. I stared at the objective for a full minute. Then I discovered the system had a sense of humor. It did not require biological age. It measured official age classification. So I went to the city registry and found a clerk whose handwriting was terrible. I paid the legal fee to correct my records. He accidentally entered my age as 1 year old instead of 21. The system accepted it. Challenge complete. Reward. Developmental potential exceeds target by 1%. The city registry tried to fix the mistake the next morning, but by then I had already received a child tax exemption and an academy enrollment notice. The academy headmaster personally came to my apartment to demand answers. He arrived while I was eating breakfast in a damaged chair, with Pickle stealing toast and Bucket sleeping on the roof. He slammed my new enrollment document onto the table. Why does this say you are 1? Clerical error. Why does it say your occupation is infant archmage? Second clerical error. Why does it say your legal guardian is the Calamity Finch? I looked at Pickle. Pickle looked at me. That one is new. The headmaster sat down and covered his face. We cannot keep doing this. Doing what? Improving near you. I agreed completely. Unfortunately, the strongest people in the world were now competing to become worse. Warriors started hiding their training gains by wearing weighted armor and pretending to limp. Mages intentionally mispronounced spell chants during public exams. Assassins began arriving late to missions, so nobody would accuse them of speed records. One famous healer left a patient's cold untreated for 6 extra minutes because curing it instantly might have counted as a milestone. The guilds created a new policy called achievement suppression. It was exactly what it sounded like. If someone felt themselves approaching a major breakthrough, they were instructed to stop, sit down, breathe slowly, and think mediocre thoughts until they were at least 300 kilometers away from me. For a while, it worked. Then the monsters started breaking records. No one had considered that. The system did not say my rival had to be human. The first disaster happened when Bucket flew over the northern wall and beat the national altitude record for a tamed wyvern. He was my own pet. The system still triggered. Challenge generated. Surpass Bucket's flight altitude. Reward. Aerial mobility exceeds target by 1%. I yelled at Bucket to come down. He interpreted this as encouragement and flew higher. The target number increased in real time. I had to act fast. I grabbed 2 shields, tied them to my feet, poured mana into the metal, and used controlled pressure bursts like rocket engines. I shot into the sky. At 6,000 meters, I regretted everything. At 8,000 meters, I passed Bucket. At 9,000 meters, Bucket saw me and thought we were racing. At 11,000 meters, Pickle flew past both of us without trying. The system changed targets. Nearby individual has achieved a superior aerial milestone. I screamed so loudly the clouds moved. Challenge updated. Surpass Pickle's flight altitude. Pickle kept climbing. I had created my own enemy. I overloaded the shield engines. One exploded. I spun sideways, grabbed Bucket's tail as he passed, used him like a sling, launched upward, and barely crossed above Pickle before both shields disintegrated. Challenge complete. Reward applied. Aerial mobility exceeded target by 1%. I stopped falling. Not because I had wings. The system had simply adjusted my movement ability to surpass a bird whose entire existence revolved around ignoring gravity. I stood on the air. Bucket hovered nearby. Pickle landed on my shoulder. We were 10 kilometers above the capital. I looked down at the tiny city. Then I looked at my feet. Then I took one step forward. The air held me. I could walk through the sky. That should have been incredible. Instead, every mage in the capital saw me standing above the clouds and immediately assumed I had discovered a new flight spell. 3 of them achieved breakthroughs trying to copy me. 3 quests appeared at once. That was the day I learned Rival Hunter could stack challenges. 1 mage achieved the longest sustained flight. Another achieved the fastest levitation casting time. The third became the first person to control 100 floating swords at once. The system gave me all 3 objectives simultaneously. I had 17 minutes. I landed in the academy courtyard like an angry meteor. Celine saw the 3 quest screens reflected in my eyes and shouted, "Everyone stop learning. Too late." I borrowed 101 practice swords, floated them using my improved mana control, cast the levitation spell without chanting, and then realized the sustained flight record required me to remain airborne for 18 hours. I had 17 minutes. Once again, wording saved me. The objective said surpass the longest sustained flight. It did not say the flight had to happen in normal time. The academy owned a time dilation chamber used for advanced training. Celine looked at me. I looked at Celine. She said, "Absolutely not." I was already running. We activated the chamber at maximum compression. 1 minute outside became 70 minutes inside. I floated in the chamber while controlling 101 swords and casting levitation repeatedly with no chant. For me, the next 18 hours were extremely boring. For everyone outside, 15 minutes passed. When I emerged, I had completed all 3 challenges. The rewards hit at once. My aerial movement improved. My casting initiation became nearly instantaneous. My multi-object control increased beyond the sword mage's limit. Unfortunately, the 101 swords were still following my thoughts. I sneezed. They all pointed at Celine. She raised both hands. "I surrender. I was not attacking you. That somehow makes it worse." The crisis should have ended there. Instead, a messenger sprinted into the courtyard. He was pale enough to look undead. "Emergency from the Eastern Sea," he gasped. Nobody wanted to ask. Celine asked anyway. "What happened?" The messenger swallowed. "The Leviathan Emperor surfaced. That was bad." Then he continued. "It defeated the Imperial fleet alone. Worse, and the Ocean Temple has recognized it as the strongest sea creature in recorded history." Everyone slowly turned toward me. I did not hear a chime. For one beautiful second, I thought the system only worked at close range. Then the eastern horizon flashed blue. A shockwave rolled over the city. The sea, hundreds of kilometers away, had apparently risen high enough for the Leviathan Emperor's aura to reach the capital. The system chimed. Challenge generated. Surpass the Leviathan Emperor. I looked at the objective. Then I looked at Celine. Then I looked back at the objective. It said only one thing: become more dominant in water. I had no idea what that meant. Neither did anyone else. But the timer was already counting down from 24 hours. The Eastern Sea was not close. For a normal army, reaching it took 8 days. For me, it took 40 minutes because I had recently learned that roads were optional. I ran across the sky with Bucket flying beside me and Pickle sleeping inside my shirt as if none of this concerned him. Below us, towns blurred into colored streaks. Mountains passed like stepping stones. I crossed a thunderstorm, accidentally outran the lightning inside it, and gained exactly 0 quests because apparently weather was not considered a rival. I was disappointed and relieved at the same time. When I reached the coast, I understood why everyone feared the Leviathan Emperor. The creature was enormous. Not dragon enormous. Not castle enormous. Its back looked like an island chain rising from the sea. Each scale was larger than a house. Its horns reached into the clouds. Every time it breathed, the tide changed direction. The remains of the Imperial fleet floated around it like broken toys. Thousands of soldiers had already evacuated to shore. The Beast Queen was there, standing on a cliff with every sea tamer in the kingdom. She saw me walking down through the air and pointed at the ocean. Your problem. Why is it my problem? Because if any of us solve it too impressively, you get another quest. That was fair. The system still wanted me to become more dominant in water than the Leviathan Emperor. I landed on the surface of the sea. My improved aerial mobility let me stand on it. But the system displayed no progress. Apparently standing on water did not impress an ocean monster. I jumped in. That was worse. I could swim fast thanks to my physical stats, but the Leviathan moved faster by twitching one fin. I tried diving deeper. It went deeper. I tried holding my breath. The Leviathan did not need to hold its breath because it had gills. I surfaced, annoyed. The Beast Queen shouted from shore. Dominance is not speed. What is it then? Make the water obey you. That sounded impossible. Then I remembered Celine's mana lessons. Water contained mana. Not much, but enough. An entire ocean contained a ridiculous amount. I extended my senses. At first, all I felt was chaos. Waves, currents, salt, life, heat, pressure. Millions of tiny mana fluctuations colliding endlessly. Trying to control the whole sea was like trying to braid a hurricane, so I stopped trying to control it. Instead, I gave it one small instruction. Move away from me. My mana spread outward in a perfect circular pulse. The sea obeyed. Water pulled back in every direction. For 3 kilometers around me, the ocean floor appeared. Ships dropped onto wet sand. Fish flopped in confusion. The Leviathan Emperor, which had been floating comfortably 1 second earlier, crashed belly first onto the exposed seabed. There was a silence so complete I could hear one sailor whisper, "That seems unfair." The Leviathan roared. The sea rushed back. I pushed again. The water retreated. It summoned a tidal wave. I split the wave around myself. It dove. I removed the water under it. It tried to create a whirlpool. I reversed the spin. For 5 straight minutes, the strongest sea creature in history fought me for control of its own environment, while I stood there barefoot and increasingly irritated. Then the system chimed. Challenge complete. Reward applied. Aquatic dominance exceeds target by 1%. The effect was immediate. The ocean no longer felt hostile. Pressure, movement, breathing, balance, current flow, even underwater sound became natural to me. I could move through water the way Pickle moved through air. The Leviathan stared at me. I stared back. Then, very slowly, it lowered its head. The Beast Queen screamed from shore. Do not tame it. I raised both hands. I am not taming it. The Leviathan nudged my shoulder with a horn the size of a tower. The system chimed. Bond established. The Beast Queen fell to her knees. I pointed at the Leviathan. No, we are acquaintances. It made a happy sound that created a 2-meter wave. Pickle flew out of my shirt and landed on its nose. Bucket landed on its back. The Leviathan began following me. I had somehow collected another pet. I refused to name it. That lasted 4 minutes. I named it Puddle. The Eastern Navy did not find this funny. Puddle did. By the time I returned to the capital, the situation had become political. The rulers of 5 kingdoms had held an emergency summit about me without inviting me. Their conclusion was simple. Nobody was allowed to become impressive near Ren Vale. The new laws were absurd. Public ranking ceremonies were moved to remote islands. S-rank promotions were sealed for 30 days before publication. Anyone attempting a world record had to submit a form declaring my current location. Guild halls installed warning bells that rang whenever I entered the district. The Mage Association created a spell that detected sudden improvements and automatically teleported the improving mage 200 kilometers away. It malfunctioned on the first day and teleported an entire classroom because one student finally understood fractions. The academy banned fractions for a week. Things became even stranger when powerful people started pretending to be weak. Garrick deliberately lost an arm wrestling match to a baker. Lyra walked everywhere at the speed of an elderly turtle. Celine began casting fireballs using full chance, hand signs, a wand, 3 assistants and written instructions just so nobody could accuse her of improving efficiency. Kale Draven carried his wooden sword around but refused to draw it. Whenever anyone asked whether he had learned a new technique, he answered, "No, I have become dramatically worse." He seemed to enjoy this too much. For 2 weeks, the capital experienced peace. Then the Merchant Crown updated its financial rankings. A banker named Orlan Vey became the richest individual on the continent. He was not even in the capital. His achievement was announced through a crystal broadcast. Unfortunately, I was standing near one of the broadcast towers when the news arrived. The system chimed. Challenge generated. Surpass Orlan Vey's total recognized wealth. I looked at my wallet. I had 19 silver coins, 1 expired meal voucher, and a handwritten note from Garrick that said he owed me a shield. Ren Vale had 12 billion gold crowns. I had 6 hours. I went directly to the royal treasury. The guards saw me coming and closed the gates. "I am not robbing you," I shouted. They opened the gates slightly. "I need financial advice." They closed them again. Eventually, I found an appraiser willing to help, after I promised not to become the richest man by destroying the economy. He explained that recognized wealth included property, contracts, artifacts, companies, land, and other assets. That gave me an idea. "What is Puddle worth?" I asked. The appraiser looked out the window. Puddle was visible from the capital despite being parked in the distant ocean because his horns reached above the horizon. The appraiser swallowed. "You cannot own the Leviathan Emperor." Puddle made a sound through our bond. The appraiser's valuation crystal cracked. I showed him the Beast Queen's contract seal, proving that Puddle had voluntarily accepted me as his bonded companion. The appraiser stared at it for a long time. Then he calculated the theoretical military, magical, transportation, and disaster prevention value of the strongest sea creature in history. The number exceeded 12 billion. The system did nothing. "Why?" I demanded. The appraiser looked at the fine print. "Bonded companions are not property." Puddle made a smug noise from hundreds of kilometers away. I respected him for that. Then I remembered my spoon. Not the melted one. I had forged another. It was sitting in my apartment drawer. I brought it to the appraiser. He stared at the spoon. I told him what it could do. He tested it on diamond, mithril, barrier glass, cursed steel, and a supposedly unbreakable relic box. The spoon cut through all of them. He began sweating. "There is nothing else like this." Correct. It could revolutionize manufacturing. Probably. It could threaten every secure vault on the continent. That sounds bad when you say it that way. He called 3 more appraisers. Then the royal treasury master arrived. Then the head of the merchant crown. They spent 2 hours arguing over the theoretical value of a spoon. Finally, they issued a certified appraisal, 12 billion and 1 gold crowns. The system chimed. Challenge complete. Reward applied. My wealth generation potential exceeded Ren Vale's by 1%. I waited. Nothing happened. I looked at my wallet. Still 19 silver. What did I actually get? A new system explanation appeared. You now possess superior instinct for recognizing profitable opportunities. At that exact moment, the appraiser offered to buy the spoon for 13 billion. I said no. The system flashed a warning. Profitable opportunity ignored. I told it to mind its own business. The next morning, every bank in the capital offered me a private account. I still kept my money under my mattress. That decision became important when Pickle ate the mattress. The strangest thing about becoming absurdly powerful was that my life did not become easier. It became faster. Every problem immediately created another problem. When I learned underwater dominance, sailors asked me to stop hurricanes. When I gained wealth instinct, merchants asked me to predict markets. When I gained sword mastery, knights challenged me constantly. When I gained healing, nobles started arriving at my apartment with mysterious back pain they had ignored for 20 years. I moved 3 times. They kept finding me. Finally, I decided to leave the capital. My plan was to travel to the empty frontier, a giant desert where almost nobody lived. No guild headquarters, no academies, no ranking ceremonies, no geniuses accidentally becoming legends while boiling bathwater. I packed food, money, 3 spoons, 2 spare coats, and 1 emergency anti-pickle sandwich. Bucket carried most of it. Pickle carried nothing. Puddle followed along the coast even though I repeatedly told him deserts did not contain enough water for him. The first day was peaceful. The second day was peaceful. On the third day, I began to believe I had finally defeated the system using geography. Then I met a farmer. His name was Bram. He lived alone in a tiny frontier village and grew enormous red melons in terrible soil. I stopped to buy one. He cut it open, offered me a slice, and apologized because he said this season's crop was disappointing. It was the best fruit I had ever eaten. The system chimed. I nearly threw the melon into the sun. Bram had unknowingly cultivated the highest quality manna fruit in recorded agricultural history. Challenge generated. Surpass Bram's cultivation achievement. I stared at the old farmer. He stared at me. "I am sorry," he said. "Did I do something?" "No. You grew a melon. Is that bad?" "Today, yes. The objective required me to grow a more potent plant before sunset. I had never farmed. I did, however, have perfect mana control, superior cooking instincts, crafting precision, healing ability, and a profitable opportunity sense that was screaming at me to buy Bram's entire field. I ignored the money sense again. Instead, I planted 1 melon seed. I controlled the moisture in the soil using aquatic dominance. I redistributed minerals with mana. I used healing energy to accelerate cell growth. I adjusted sunlight exposure by floating 100 polished spoons overhead as mirrors. Then Pickle landed beside the seed and sneezed. The ground shook. A vine exploded upward. It wrapped around my legs, climbed Bucket's neck, crossed the village roof, and produced 1 melon larger than a wagon. The system evaluated it. Potency exceeded Bram's crop by 1%. Challenge complete. Reward applied. Agricultural talent exceeded target by 1%. Bram looked at the giant melon. Then he looked at me. Want a job? For half a second I considered it. Then the melon cracked open and released enough concentrated mana to make every chicken in the village evolve. One chicken grew horns. Another developed fire breath. A third looked directly at me with the calm confidence of a creature that had seen beyond mortality. The system chimed. I ran. I did not even read the quest. I just ran into the desert while Bucket flew overhead and Pickle laughed in bird language. The system screen followed me. Nearby individual has achieved a major milestone. First chicken to awaken draconic bloodline. Challenge generated. Surpass target's draconic blood purity. I stopped. No. The screen remained. I am not becoming more dragon than a chicken. The timer ticked down. I spent the next hour arguing with a floating screen in the middle of a desert. Eventually, Bucket solved the problem by biting me. His saliva entered my bloodstream. Because he was a high wyvern with ancient dragon ancestry, the system recognized temporary draconic contamination. It was not enough, so I used healing control to isolate the dragon-linked cells, forced my body to accept them, and increase their expression by exactly the smallest amount possible. For 10 terrifying seconds, I grew 1 scale on my elbow. The system compared my draconic purity to the chicken's. Challenge complete. Reward applied. I gained superior draconic compatibility. The scale vanished. Bucket stared at me. Then he lowered his head. I knew that look. Do not get ideas. He roared happily. Pickle landed on my shoulder. Somewhere behind us, the dragon chicken roared too. I kept walking. By the time I reached the empty frontier, I was convinced the universe itself was trying to produce rivals around me. The desert should have been empty. Instead, I found an army camp. Tens of thousands of soldiers had gathered around an ancient ruin that had risen from beneath the sand overnight. Royal banners from 6 kingdoms surrounded the site. Selene was there. Garrick was there. Lyra was there. Kale was there. When they saw me approaching, every single one of them shouted, "Go away." I stopped walking. That is rude. Selene teleported directly in front of me. You cannot be here. I came here specifically because no one was supposed to be here. The ruin appeared yesterday. Then I will leave. She grabbed my arm. Too late. I looked toward the ruin. At its center stood a black tower taller than any structure I had ever seen. Strange symbols crawled across its surface. The air around it felt wrong, like mana itself was trying not to touch it. What is that? I asked. Kale answered from behind Selene. The Zero Spire. I had heard the name once in an old legend. The Zero Spire supposedly appeared before the first dungeon era, when humans had no ranks, no guilds, and no system stones. According to myth, it belonged to the beings who created the concept of advancement itself. I suddenly disliked it. Garrick walked over. We were going to investigate quietly. Why are there 6 armies? They are being quiet by military standards. A cannon fired in the distance. Garrick winced. Relatively quiet. Then the tower doors opened. No one touched them. A figure walked out. He looked human. That was the worst part. He was young, maybe my age, with black hair, pale eyes, and simple clothes that looked completely wrong among the armored armies. He carried no weapon. I sensed no mana from him. Not low mana. None. Selene whispered, I cannot read him. Kale's hand moved toward his sword. The stranger looked at the crowd. Then he looked directly at me. He smiled. A stone tablet at the entrance of the Zero Spire lit up. Ancient letters rearranged themselves into modern language. The soldiers nearest it began shouting. A translator read the inscription aloud. Record recognized. First human to clear floor 0. I waited for the system chime. Nothing happened. Everyone else relaxed. I did not. The stranger kept smiling at me. Then the tablet changed again. New title recognized. Rank 0. The system inside my head made a sound I had never heard before. Not a chime, an alarm. Every quest window I had ever completed flashed around me at once. Strength, speed, mana, defense, swordsmanship, healing, crafting, taming, flight, wealth, even farming. All of them turned red. A new message appeared. Rival classification failed. Target exceeds measurable framework. I felt my stomach drop. For the first time since the rival hunter system awakened, it did not know how far ahead my rival was. The stranger walked closer. 6 armies raised their weapons. He ignored them. Garrick stepped in front of me. The stranger disappeared. Lyra moved. I moved faster. Neither of us was fast enough. The stranger was suddenly standing behind me with one hand resting on my shoulder. My defensive instincts did not react. My mana senses detected nothing. My sword perception saw no attack line. My body did not even understand that he had moved. He leaned close and whispered, So you are the new one. I turned. He was already 10 steps away. What does that mean? He looked up at the Zero Spire. The rival hunter is not unique. Everything around me went silent. Celine stared at him. Kale's smile disappeared for the first time since I had met him. The stranger lifted one finger. The entire black tower behind him rose out of the desert. Not magically. He lifted it through some force I could not sense, as casually as I had once lifted a dungeon slab. Beneath the tower was not a foundation. It was a staircase descending into darkness. Hundreds of sealed doors lined the walls below. Each door had a symbol. One looked exactly like my blue system window. Another looked like a crown. Another looked like an eye. Another looked like a broken sword. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. The stranger pointed at my symbol. Yours is number 47. I could hear my own heartbeat. What happened to the other 46? He smiled again. Some became kings. Some became monsters. Most tried to surpass the wrong thing. The rival hunter system finally stabilized. A quest appeared. Challenge generated. Surpass rank 0. No reward was listed. No objective was listed. No timer appeared. Instead, one final line formed at the bottom. Target has detected the challenge. The stranger's pale eyes shifted toward the floating screen only I was supposed to see. Then he reached out and touched it. My system cracked. Actually cracked. Blue light splintered like glass across the air. I stumbled backward. For the first time, the rival hunter system sounded afraid. Emergency condition detected. Target milestone imminent. I looked at the stranger. He looked delighted. What milestone? I asked. The answer appeared one letter at a time. Rank 0 is attempting to become rank -1. Celine could not see my screen, but she saw my face. Ren, she said carefully. What is happening? I looked at the black staircase beneath the floating tower. I looked at the hundreds of sealed system doors. I looked at the man who had just touched something inside my head, as if it were a window on a wall. Then, far below us, one of the other doors opened. Something laughed in the darkness. The system generated a second quest, then a third, then 10 more. Red windows filled my vision faster than I could read them. Multiple major milestones detected. Multiple rival entities awakening. Challenge network expanding. I slowly drew the kitchen knife from my belt. Kale looked at it. Still using that? It has sentimental value. Garrick raised his shield. Lyra vanished into a fighting stance. Celine began forming 7 magic circles, apparently deciding that achievement suppression no longer mattered. Bucket roared overhead. Pickle puffed up his feathers. From hundreds of kilometers away, Puddle answered with a roar that shook the desert sand. The stranger stepped onto the staircase. He glanced back at me. If you want to surpass me, Ren Vale, you had better hurry. The first red quest finally became readable. Surpass the one who created the first ranking system. The second followed. Surpass the beast that ate an immortal god. Then the third. Surpass the swordsman who cut tomorrow in half. The fourth. Surpass the mage who erased his own name from reality. The fifth. Surpass the king whose empire exists inside 1 second of frozen time. I stared at the growing list. For months, every powerful person in the world had been terrified of announcing achievements near me. Now I understood the joke. The truly dangerous ones had never announced anything. They had been waiting under our feet, and every single one of them was starting to wake up. I gripped my kitchen knife, stepped toward the staircase, and heard the rival hunter system give me one last warning. Do not allow target to reach the next milestone. For once, I completely agreed with it.